As we delve deeper into the world of clinical research, a revolution is taking place. Decentralized clinical trials, or DCTs, are transforming the landscape of traditional methodologies. These innovative approaches are bringing trials directly to patients, breaking down barriers of distance and accessibility.
When we look at the industry, the clinical trial fundamentally hasn't changed much over the last several decades, really. What has changed is the inefficiency and the costs and timelines. Decentralized clinical trials have started transforming traditional clinical trial methodologies.
As healthcare became a traditional in-person face-to-face with a specialist or a primary care physician, and suddenly the pandemic came and we had to think about novel ways of leveraging tools and technology, there was no difference when it came to clinical research.
One of the biggest challenges in any sort of clinical study is A, recruitment, and B, keeping them in the study. Decentralized trials is one excellent way of trying to promote patient engagement, patient diversity in these clinical studies, because it allows us, first of all, to go to areas that would not typically be viable if they had to commute to a clinic in order to participate in the study. The other issue is that I think most drug sponsors have learned that integrating the patient as early as possible in the overall drug development process is going to allow you to end up with a better outcome.
No one is more experienced with living with a disease than the patients themselves, whether that be what are the benefits or the endpoints that would be meaningful to them, or certain procedures and processes that they would take part in a clinical trial. There's a lot of innovative approaches in clinical trials these days with regards to maybe more decentralized trial practices or digital health technologies. And it's important to understand from patients sort of what their experience would be with those.
For some of us, we would prefer a telemedicine visit rather than taking half day or a full day off from work to visit a clinical site or a hospital. A quick check-in via an app or a virtual telemedicine visit, that for some people might even be preferred and, more comfortable for them than going in person.
Hybrid, traditional, decentralized are different flexible options for ensuring patient centricity, but not necessarily a new type or a different type of clinical trial. The fundamentals of clinical trials haven't changed and should not change for good reason.
The industry is now asking, how can we design trials that truly put patients first? This patient-centric approach is not just about convenience, but about understanding and responding to patient preferences and needs.
Well, patient centricity is a core requirement, really, of medicine today, not just drug development. The patient wants to be involved. They want to understand that they're being heard, and they want to really participate in the overall experience. So as it relates to clinical studies, this has become an integrated component of the approach we're going to use for not only design, but also engagement.
Patient experiences and patient preferences should be at the heart of a clinical trial design, right? But very few clinical trials are designed that way. It's usually an afterthought. After the protocol is finalized and sent to the sites and CROs, that's when we are looking at, okay, does this fit? And then that's when it results in protocol amendments, going back and forth and making changes, and sometimes even shutting down clinical trials. In this day and age, that's just not acceptable at such a late stage in phase 3, when 5 million people in sub-Saharan Africa are without a treatment with sickle cell disease.
When you see a primary care physician, it might be 15 minutes away. When you see a specialist, it might be 60 minutes away. But on average, when an individual seeks to do clinical research, they have to change their pattern of care towards moving to likely an academic medical center. And on average, it's more than 90 minutes away from where an individual lives. So if you're not using some form of design up front, engaging and listening, you're not going to know that that individual needs to have public transit. Is it near a bus path? What do I do with daycare if I take time off work because I need additional visits than I would for care delivery that I need for clinical research? And so suddenly, if you're not listening to the patient or the caregiver and understanding where they are in the community, you're not going to be able to design a trial that's able to effectively reach in a community, enroll them, retain them, and make sure that they're compliant and adherent throughout the process.
Flexibility is key here. Protocols can be written to allow the patients, the choice of visiting the clinical site or having their drugs shipped to their home. So personally, I've seen multiple studies set up to have one decentralized site as well as all of the traditional sites. This would allow the patient to choose which model they're more comfortable with. I really think too that in the DCT model, just like the face-to-face visit, the virtual check-ins need to be scheduled for adequate time and allow the patient to ask any questions they have, express any concerns, and develop the relationship with the study team. So again, it goes back to building trust and being comfortable with the people that are providing your care. Frequent check-ins via an app and telemedicine visits, I think, can sometimes be more effective for some people than the in-person visit.
One of the most pressing issues in clinical research has been the lack of diversity among trial participants. Now, technology is opening new doors to address this historical imbalance. By reaching a more diverse population, we're not only improving access, but also enhancing the validity and generalizability of study findings.
When we look at the 400,000 or more clinical trials that have happened historically, majority of them still continue to run in the United States and European Union, majority Caucasian population, and there is also lack of diversity and inclusion from a age, gender, and other socioeconomic backgrounds. With innovative new therapeutic products, we got to really engage the entire human population and race. More than half of the world's population is in Asia, whereas they account for less than 6% of the clinical trial participants. And I think technology should be brought to bear in really addressing these fundamental core problems.
FDA has published a number of guidances to promote inclusion of underrepresented populations in clinical trials and to help facilitate generalizability of the medical product's efficacy and safety findings to the intended population. These guidances specifically address enrollment of children, pregnant people, older adults, and ethnic and racial underrepresented populations. It's important to remember that individuals who are underrepresented in clinical trials may disproportionately live in areas without access to clinical research facilities. Some individuals may not be familiar with new technologies, and others may not have broadband access. So it's very important to assess these issues before using a proposed technology and to mitigate these risks using various strategies before the clinical trial begins.
Regardless of the technology, patients need to be able to feel comfortable with their healthcare providers, and there has to be that trust. Listening to diverse patient communities about their concerns and suggestions for recruiting more diverse participants is the first step. We have to listen and we have to act. A lot of studies still don't report race as part of their study findings. It's just unbelievable to me. We need to change that. And being transparent about the recruitment methods and doing everything we can to increase the participation is vital. In reading some data, there's so many studies where we're studying 10 maybe Asian patients and 10 African American patients, but then we look at 290 white patients. So that's not adequate. And increasing the diversity in those participants is critical to the validity and the generalizability of the study data.
Wearable technology is at the forefront of this revolution, offering unprecedented opportunities for data collection and patient monitoring. These devices are providing researchers with real-time, continuous data, but their adoption also brings new challenges to navigate.
Wearables allow us to potentially go after populations which could be meaningful in the particular disease state we're going after, and if they're in remote areas, they're rural areas out there. And I think it's given us a knob that we never had before.
Digital health technologies, including wearable technologies, can collect data much more frequently and quickly than scheduled trial visits, sometimes even continuously. These technologies can collect biometric information, heart rate, sleep patterns, hormone levels, to name a few. And they may be able to identify adverse events faster than intermittent monitoring. The quality and the quantity of data that wearable technology can collect is astonishing.
There's these little hints in how we interact on a day-to-day basis that over time can tell whether a therapeutic is effective in its purpose. They can be secondary data points allowing us to gauge the safety and overall health of the individual.
Wearables, batteries die, they have to be recharged, they have to have an internet connection. In many rural areas, there isn't that internet connection up there. So I think you need to be circumspect a little bit when you start looking at where the best application of these wearables are.
In terms of clinical trial sponsors, they need to consider how to ensure the privacy and security of the data that is obtained from these wearables.
Privacy in the US has kind of been rolled back dramatically here, but in many parts of the world, the EU, for example, it's first and foremost, right? So having those regulatory and legal questions answered up front is something that's essential if you're going to really take full advantage of some of these wearables.
Devices themselves have to go through a regulatory rigor to get out and into the hands of the individuals. And in some cases, those devices might be a generation or two behind what the expectations are. And so you've got this dichotomy of something I use on a minute-to-minute basis and then something I need to use for a particular trial. But most importantly is the integration and interoperability of this data.
From the logistical side of things, clinical trial sponsors also need to ensure that the wearable technology, the digital technology, and the systems in the clinical trial are compatible with each other so that data collection is streamlined and consistent.
Remote monitoring is another game changer in the world of clinical trials. While it offers significant advantages in efficiency and patient comfort, it also presents unique drawbacks that researchers must address.
The convenience of remote monitoring for participants cannot be overstated. These technologies and the conveniences associated with these technologies may make individuals more likely to enroll and remain in clinical trials. In addition, individuals may feel more engaged and empowered about their own health care. The main issues regarding wearables include an individual's comfort with the use of the technology, whether or not they have access to broadband, and data security and privacy issues. In addition, some individuals may wish to directly interact with clinical trial investigators, and they may want to go to clinical trial sites or have the clinical investigator come to them.
Remote patient monitoring technologies, when integrated effectively in clinical trial operations, can be dramatically impactful. Engage the underserved populations, not only here in the United States, in rural areas, hard to reach geographic regions, but also globally, right? And so with remote monitoring, one, you're decentralizing some of the operations at the patient's home, but also you are making patients more comfortable. There is evidence to show that blood pressures are a lot more close to normal when measured at home in a comfortable setting versus in a white coat setting where patients are a bit nervous. And two, you get more accurate data. You're measuring not in an artificial setting that you created for a clinical trial, but how does the patient look and feel and measure data points when the patient is going about their day-to-day life in a real-world setting.
In trials where normally the patient would take the drug home with them, to me, it makes sense to give them the option of having the DTP delivery to their home instead. A lot of sponsors are still using the site-to-patient model, which honestly winds up being more expensive when you factor everything in, including the number of clinical sites that you have and the clinical site visits, and then having that clinical site do the actual shipping of that product.
Remote monitoring also is a much more cost-effective solution. It reduces the need for a physical site. It saves time on travel, we talked about, but it also cuts down on infrastructure costs and personnel expenses. So these all make clinical trials more economically viable.
With the increasing volume of data generated in these trials, ensuring data quality, integrity, and security has become more critical than ever. Technology is playing a crucial role in managing this data deluge through the entire research process.
Any clinical study, any drug development, drug sponsor needs to have data management at the forefront of their strategy, because this is what's going to allow you to actually buy velocity. If you think about it, we're an industry where 9 out of 10 drugs don't make it to market, which is kind of extraordinary, right? This is why it takes so long and it costs so much, because we back the wrong horse 9 out of 10 times, right? And so today we're finding predictive models are helping us get ahead of that. QSP being done at the molecule selection phase to try and mimic and predict whether we're going to have a toxicological issue as we move through the clinical process. Managing that data in a very efficient way is really first and foremost, but having the data quality infrastructure to effectively satisfy ourselves that things like data hygiene are taken care of. If there's data obsolescence or errors that take place that could ultimately confound the study because of the way the study was executed or something along those lines, these are issues you can anticipate with a really strong data quality infrastructure around that. So this is an area that we often forget to concentrate on, but it really is essential to taking advantage of the full capabilities of the technology we're putting in place.
Data integrity, data management, data processing, archiving, and over time, the destruction of that data. These processes and systems will help with how we access, process, store, back up the data, but at the end of the day, it's really up to the researchers' credibility and reliability in ensuring care over this data. Security, it's more critical today than it was 10 years ago, especially now as we're starting to talk and work with not just personal identifiable information, but personal health information. But most importantly, how do we then responsibly act on that data and provide the right information to the right patient at the right time?
Unified data platforms, centralizing data platforms, where you bring the remote patient reported outcomes data, clinician reported data, the core safety data, laboratory testing, all of that data in one place right from the beginning in unified central databases can help the sponsor, CRO, and investigator sites to all collaborate in one centralized platform. Now, there is fewer systems to monitor for quality and compliance, and you can monitor in real time as the study is progressing and identify issues early and take corrective action, preventive action much before it's too late.
CDER has launched a new center known as the CDER Center for Clinical Trial Innovation, and it has two demonstration programs within this new initiative. One to focus on streamlining the selective safety data collection within clinical trials, which recognizes that for many trials, many of the products, we have a well-established or well-understood safety profile, which means for many of the commonly occurring adverse events, collecting data on those commonly occurring adverse events doesn't necessarily add to our assessment of those products. And that's one way of decreasing the complexity within the clinical trial. A second project is around streamlining trials and embedding them into clinical practice, or our STEP demonstration, which is really exploring ways to simplify the endpoints, simplify the eligibility criteria, to make it more likely that we can integrate that randomized controlled trial into a routine clinical practice. So that also may, over time, decrease the complexity of the data requirements, which in the end may give us more data, more volumes of data, which allows us to make better decisions.
Patient engagement has taken on new dimensions in the era of DCTs. Technology is fostering meaningful interactions throughout the trial journey, with patient feedback playing an increasingly important role in refining study protocols.
Technology can help provide patients with new tools to help with the informed consent process, with providing their feedback into the clinical trial or the assessments that are being conducted. And it's critically important that drug developers or sponsors really involve patients early on in getting input on the trial designs and in the protocol. Some sponsors have even gone so far as to make patients part of the protocol development team with patient advocacy groups or patient-focused councils that can provide input into that process.
Using technology to put it in front of prospective patients who might actually consider enrolling in that clinical trial, help them make an informed choice. Is this the right fit for them? And it's not just about the clinical information, but also the logistical information. How many visits are involved? What's the travel burden? What's the additional time burden and expectation? Will they be required to take time off from their paid work? All these things are very critical when you look at it in the grand scheme of things. If there is an app or a portal where patients can log in and check their own status, how far have I progressed, what have I completed, what can they look forward to in the future, and that's very critical in not only recruiting patients upfront, but also retaining them so they actually are successful in completing the study.
Study at the Pew Center of Research said that over 81% of Americans own a smartphone. That means that's a broad-based, powerful tool by which we can have mobile health interventions.
At some point of time, that management of the data from an individual's perspective has to be as consumer friendly for our healthcare data as it is for our banking and finance data. I think that with the awareness would allow us to open up the funnel for more individuals to raise their hand and say, I'm interested in participating. I meet the inclusion criteria. When on the back end, starting to harmonize and bring together data, right? My records are across probably 3 or 4 different EHR systems. They cover different parts of my life. They cover different conditions I've had, but they're not continuous. We have a lot of entities who are bringing this all together to create that in a continuous manner. So I'm pretty excited about when it's all there, under our own individual control.
Innovative approaches to patient recruitment are emerging, particularly for harder-to-reach populations and rare diseases. These new technologies and strategies are helping to overcome long-standing challenges in trial enrollment.
Patient recruitment has been and still persists to be the gorilla in the room when we talk about the challenges in clinical trials. United States has electronic medical records implemented. However, there is 200 to 400 different EMR systems. Not all of this data is accessible easily because of HIPAA and patient privacy and data protection laws. Now, if you look at it on a global scale, this problem is huge because most of the countries do not have an electronic medical record system. And so it's a huge challenge in rare disease, even today. But what is really working in rare disease is having patient registries, patients with the same or similar diseases being in a central database, especially formed by patient advocacy groups. Each rare disease is a global public health issue. It's not a national issue, and hence we need patient registry platforms that can speak 100 different languages and engage these patients who may not be native English speakers, but equally motivated to participate and contribute to clinical research.
A lot of online patient registries and crowdsourcing platforms have been built up over the past few years that enables researchers to be able to connect with patients directly that have rare diseases. And so if I feel like my loved one or I may be eligible or might have a certain rare disease, I now have a user group. I register. I may be eligible for a trial, if not today, maybe tomorrow. If my condition changes, maybe the day after tomorrow. So these groups have really pulled together. These platforms like Patients Like Me are an example, and it allows individuals to share health data for research purposes, and it actually facilitates the recruitment process for those rare conditions.
While FDA doesn't conduct clinical trials, it is aware of many new practices in improving the recruitment of patients in clinical trials. For example, decreasing some of the complexity in clinical trials to enable those to be conducted at community practices or federally qualified health clinics is one way of increasing recruitment by just increasing the access of patients to local providers and local clinical research. In addition, there are novel approaches such as leveraging social media or social influencers in order to increase recruitment. There's tools such as artificial intelligence and machine learning that can allow us to go through and mine or analyze real-world databases such as electronic medical records to very rapidly identify patients, which can ultimately hopefully increase the number of patients that are being recruited for clinical trials.
We historically always think about urban, suburban, rural, but it really applies beyond the US into global settings and where you're getting into populations that have been remote for a period of time or have been insular. You need to be able to find those kind of rare orphan diseases and have applicability, and you need to find the populations. Once you find the populations, curate that population, garner interest, build trust, build a community of research so that individuals will trust that, come on board, and stay on board to be able to advance science. That's how you think about innovative approaches.
Automation is being integrated into various aspects of clinical trials, bringing both benefits and challenges in terms of study efficiency and reliability. This shift is reshaping how trials are conducted and managed.
So when we talk about protocol design and writing, site selection and monitoring, patient recruitment, clinical data management, data analysis and reporting, these are very specialized functions that have to be performed in each clinical trial, and usually they end up using multiple tools in each of these buckets.
Automation is being explored in many ways to help improve clinical trials. A great example of this is in streamlining study startup and decreasing the burden of conducting the clinical trials. Generative AI in particular is a very useful tool at the development of protocols and subsequent resources and information aids that can be used to give information to the study site personnel to help them with the stand-up process of their clinical research. The informed consent process, maybe through the creation of translations, still requires some validation, or through chatbots, which allows the patients to get more information to be more informed on their decisions to participate in the clinical trial. All of these tools can hopefully decrease the burden and improve or streamline the efficiency of clinical trials.
And by us taking away the repetitive and freeing up a little bit of time, I'm able to spend more time verifying the work I just did. I'm able to spend more time engaging with my peers to ensure that what we're doing is effective. We should start seeing studies being more effective by the white space in between activities, in between processes of one phase or activity ending and the next one having.
Yes, we can automate the protocol design and writing process using large language models and ChatGPT type tools to help in that process as an aid, but ultimately it still needs human expertise. So there is opportunity for probably 80-20 at every step of this process. Someone needs to verify that what the AI and automated workflows produced makes sense and refine and iterate over it, right? It's an iterative process.
Artificial intelligence is making its mark on clinical trials, from optimizing trial design to enhancing data analysis. As we look to the future, the potential application of AI in this field seems boundless.
On the clinical side, AI offers us a number of advantages. Certainly on the recruitment side, natural language processing is a fairly advanced application of the overall AI umbrella there, but it allows us to more accurately and rapidly identify patients which are going to fit the criteria for the particular trial design we're coming up with. Predictive modeling in terms of how we're going to ultimately design these clinical studies. We can do simulations with AI now in advance and run different trial designs. One of the things that is slowly but surely gaining traction is the notion of adaptive trial design. An adaptive trial design allows you to sort of make adjustments to your trial design based on intermediate data results that you're getting from it. There are things like in the actual application of different drug therapies, a study that was done back east on dynamic dosing, in which dynamic dosing is when you've got a very sick patient and you cannot just hit them with the chemotherapy full force because they can't take it. They're not healthy enough to do it. So you need to modulate how and when and how often you should do the different cocktails for cancer, for example. There, AI allows us to run those simulations based on physiological data to optimize that treatment. So we're seeing it being applied in a number of ways.
Since 2016, the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research and Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research have received over 350 submissions with AI components. Common uses of AI include outcome prediction, dose selection and optimization, pharmacometric modeling, real-world data phenotyping, and natural language processing. When evaluating AI models, it's important to take into consideration the data that are used to train the models. Generally speaking, these data should be fit for use, and they need to be both reliable and relevant. Part of that equation is that the data are representative of the intended population for the medical product.
First and foremost, with the advent of large language models, this technology is very well fine-tuned for handling and working with large documents, something that we have many, many of here in the clinical trial industry. So these models are built for purpose to be able to help us rewrite particular documents at a particular reading level, or summarize a particular document to highlight the key points. In the more advanced phases, looking at the earlier phases in the discovery and research phases of drug discovery, identifying molecules and potential actions and activities that happen in particular combinations. As more AI gets into our workflows, obviously we'll be able to identify quality issues faster, identify outliers faster, respond to situations in a more real-time basis than after days, weeks, or months. Again, none of this will be done without the intervention of a human. We do believe, and it will be for a long time, that there will be a human in the loop, especially when it comes to activities that have to do with safety. But it's certainly a new tool that we have today that we did not have yesterday for us to move the ball forward.
You can essentially look to accelerate clinical trials, improve safety, and also personalize it for individuals. And you can now look to completely transform clinical research with the leveraging of large data and their insights through large language models, machine learning, and now what we call AI.
As we face these challenges and opportunities, the question remains, what does the future hold for clinical trials? Despite the hurdles, there's a sense of optimism in the air. The industry is poised for success, driven by innovation and a renewed focus on patient needs.
While I understand and appreciate the need to carefully evaluate everything we do and all the implications for the changes introduced into the clinical trial process, I think we really need more action, less talk at this point. So even introducing smaller, more manageable changes, whatever the sponsor and the patient population and the investigators are comfortable with, that's going to help us drive our industry to a future where DCT elements become more commonplace in clinical research.
It's exciting to see all of the different ways that clinical practice and healthcare is evolving and how that is going to shift and move into the clinical research space. And the sort of pace of biomedical innovation is picking up incredibly. And so as we explore new challenges, whether that be for personalized medicine or for cell and gene therapies, making sure that our clinical trials are fit for purpose and able to generate evidence for these new types of products will be incredibly important.
We've got the potential to reinvent clinical research from the ground up based on all that we know about looking to embrace diversity and make it essential, as well as embracing technology and the data that we have today to really transform it. It shouldn't take years. It should take months to be able to cycle and process information, to be able to evaluate and get therapies to market. I think it's a great endpoint that we should all strive for.
What I think this industry is now embracing is adoption of meaningful technology, AI, automation, and efficiency, which can really drive the next generation of smaller, emerging, innovative, nimble biotech and pharmaceutical companies that are bringing some novel therapeutic modalities like antisense oligonucleotides or cell and gene therapies. What we need is will to change the status quo, to challenge traditional methods and adopt how we can innovate and embrace modern clinical trial methodologies and technology platforms which can really revolutionize the way we conduct clinical trials.
The compute power that we have with these support vector machines and these quantum computers have changed the game in terms of our ability to do more with AI. The application and the benefits of what these tools can do today, not only in doing what we do currently better and more reliably, but also potentially giving us the ability to look forward and anticipate things so we can build them into our clinical trial design. I think the future is nothing but great and fantastic.